Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video is going to discuss the bizarre murder-suicide of Phil Hartman and his wife Bren in Encino, California. That took place on May 28th, 1998, and that is near Sherman Oaks. It's not very far from the Peter Grossman Cosmetic Surgery Center, which the media wants you to think that's a burn center for Anne Heche. It's pretty close to there. It's pretty close to where Charlie Manson used to live at 21019 Gresham Street in Canoga Park. Not very far. Under 6 miles away. Anyway, and it's within 1 mile of where Francis Gary Powers, CIA spy pilot for Lockheed, CIA, Air Force colonel, but worked for Lockheed. It's a mile from where he was murdered at the Sepulveda Dam Recreational Park in the outfield of one of the numerous baseball fields they have there. Walking distance to where Phil Hartman was shot 3 times with a .38 caliber pistol. .38. It's the weapon used to murder-suicide Art Linklatter's son-in-law, John Zweier, in West Hollywood, as he sat next to a swimming pool in West Hollywood at his home with Art Linklatter's daughter inside the house, allegedly. 38. It's the same pistol caliber used to murder the entire Victor Ota ophthalmologist family up in Soquel, Santa Cruz Way, near Monterey and Fort Ord. Dr. Ota was shot in the back of the head with 2 .38 caliber pistol shots, and his wife Virginia also shot once. His receptionist, age 38, shot to death by a .38 in the back of the head. His 2 children, ages 11 and 8, shot in the back of the head after having his scarves put around their eyes and their wrists tied. And then they were all 5. That's 5 people. That's 3 adults. It's 2 children. They were all tossed in the swimming pool. And we're going to come back to that because that figures into my second half of the story, which I'm going to weave into the Phil Hartman murder-suicide, is William Shatner, Captain Kirk, Starship Enterprise. 1 year after this mysterious murder-suicide death of Phil Hartman, we had the mysterious drunken drowning death of William Shatner's third of 4 wives. He went on to marry and divorce a 4th wife. So William Shatner has been married 4 times. He's been divorced 3, and he was in the process of getting divorced to his strong swimmer wife, whose name is Noreen. She was from Boston originally. Anyway, she was a model, aspiring actress, age 40. And according to her agent at LA Talent, she was a strong swimmer and she swam almost daily. So it is unusual that she would go swimming at nighttime with the sun down and have an alcohol level 3 times the legal limit, and then be found at the bottom of the pool when William Shatner returned home at about 10:15 p.m. And that was on August 9th, 1999. Okay, so that's 1 year and 4.5 months after the Phil Hartman situation. And that was in Studio City, which again is in close proximity to NBC Studio, close proximity to Disney, close proximity to CBS, close proximity to where the Manson girls were housed in 3 houses and 2 swimming pools, close to Frank Zappa, where he lived in Encino, and he also lived in Laurel Canyon, and it's the same distance away as Phil Hartman, which is close. It's a 20-minute drive to work. Phil Hartman lived at, I'll give you the address, 5065 Encino Avenue, which is just south of Highway 101, aka the Ventura Freeway. It's pretty close proximity to Highway 405 San Diego Freeway, and fairly close proximity to the Getty Museum, Mulholland Drive. UCLA Medical Center is within 12 miles. Isn't that funny? It's a shorter distance from Phil Hartman's home on Encino Avenue to the UC Medical Center than it was for Anne Heche to get from Venice to the Grossman burn unit. That's 27 miles. I point these things out. I think relationships are important to notice, and I think that the distances are important since most of us are unable to go and personally visit these crime scenes, which I'm telling you, if you visited the Sharon Tate crime scene or the Lena LaBianca, Rosemary LaBianca crime scenes, you'd come away with a different understanding than you had before you visited. Your understanding will be stronger, or it'll change. It'll change from what you thought. Because let's be honest, we've all been told by, Vanity Fair and People and TMZ, and we've been told by the New York Post and the Washington Post and the Daily Mail and the Sun what happened. And it turns out that in really all cases, that's incorrect. What they're telling you is incorrect. So when you go to these places, you can see kind of what's possible and what is not possible. You can't see it in every single element of the case, but you can see enough to where you decide to reject what you've been told and just say, you know what, I'll just figure it out on my own, or I'll just say it's unresolved, because you're not going to accept the poppycock narrative once you realize how much they've materially erred. All right, so just a quick background information who Phil Hartman is. He was 10 years older than me. He was 49 years old when he was shot 3 times with a .38 pistol, allegedly by his wife that he was in the process of divorcing, Bern Hartman, and she also was a model actress. Of course, that was Phil Hartman's third marriage, his third. He had 2 other marriages that lasted under 3 years each. So this one had actually lasted the longest. He married her in 1987, and they were in the process of getting divorced during 1998. And so that's kind of looking like a 12-year marriage. Anyway, it ended with a double murder, suicide, whatever you want to call it, alphabet soup. So Phil Hartman didn't come from... there's a lot of similarities between Phil Hartman and William Shatner. I'm disturbed to tell you. Besides the fact that they both had wives be murdered or suicided away in close proximity to each other. They had that in common also. William Shatner residing in Studio City, below Laurel Canyon, near Toluca Lake, and Phil Hartman and Bern Hartman found dead at 5065 Encino Avenue in the city of Encino. Yeah, it's probably 12 miles distance from William Shatner's house, the William Shatner crime scene, to the Phil Hartman crime scene. 12 and a half miles distance, door to door. All right, so Phil Hartman came from Ontario, Canada, specifically Brantford, Ontario. And at age 10, he moved to the United States with his family. First, they moved to Maine. Then they moved to Connecticut. Then they moved out to Los Angeles way. And I'm not really clear what city they moved to. I'm going to assume it was Los Angeles. Probably kind of sort of close to where the Anne Heche fiery car crash was, because Phil Hartman, by the time he got to be age 14, he went to high school at Westchester High School, which is 4.4 miles from the 1766 Walgrove Avenue where the felony arson fire was, that the media wants you to believe that Anne Heche in a Mini Cooper crashed her car into that at 90 miles an hour without breaking a branch in a hedgerow, without harming a pet turtle or tortoise, without being able to leap up 3.5 feet in the air and like Houdini and go into a house, burn every one of the 5 rooms of the house without scorching any of the next door neighbors in 3 directions. and at a delayed reaction because we had David Manpearl attempting to rescue her, climbing into her car through the rear doors, the rear double doors of the Mini Club Cooper station wagon. And then he was unsuccessful, and he fled the scene because a fire broke out from under the car. And I guess he would prefer to leave Anne Heche to her fate than to rescue her, so he escaped, dodging questions at every turn, but setting up that GoFundMe page quick like a bunny rabbit to make sure that pet turtle has some do-re-mi. So anyway, I'm going to call poppycock on the Anne Heche car crash, because there was no car crash. There was an arson fire. Looks like 2 arson fires of the house and the car. Anyway, so in the case of Phil Hartman, we have a lot of poppycock going on in his background because he went to the Westchester High School, and then he wasn't sure what to do, so he ended up going to Santa Monica Junior College, which is only it's 1.5 miles. It's walking distance from the Anne Heche car crash. It's closer to the car crash than is the New Roads School where Dakota Johnson did 3 years of high school. My point of bringing this up, people, is that Phil Hartman was chosen. He was chosen to work at NBC. He was chosen to give rock and roll album design credits. He designed 40 album covers for rock and roll bands, most of whom you don't know and haven't heard of. But Poco, America, and of course Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Where have we heard that before? Crosby, Stills, Nash and Neil Young, Warner Brothers. So Phil Hartman got a gig with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young to design one of their covers in the late 70s, which is about the time that he magically appeared on The Dating Game. That was his first television appearance, where Phil Hartman was the bachelor was one of 3 bachelors who was interviewing for a date with a young lady, and Phil Hartman won. He was selected to be the date on The Dating Game, Phil Hartman. And you do know that game is fake, right? I mean, it's decided in advance who's going to win. I mean, you watch the quiz show, a CBS or NBC production, I can't remember which fake network produced, the quiz show rigging, which I believe they're all rigged, so I'm not picking on any one network. They're all doing the same magic tricks. So anyway, that was Phil Hartman's introduction into television, was through The Dating Game, where he was the successful bachelor winning a date with the whoever it was, actress/girl. And like he said, he got married and divorced twice. Then he marries Bren, who's a model, and they have a difficult relationship. It's pinned on the fact that she takes drugs and drinks a lot, but apparently he also had some issues personally with intimacy, emotional connection, blah 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 blah. Who knows what happened, people? Anyway, he goes on to Saturday Night Live, which is in New York, for NBC, Peacock, and he has a 12-year career there, very successful, and people come and go, but Phil Hartman stays. Phil Hartman stays. I always get his name confused with Phil Kaufman, who was Charlie Manson's cellmate at nearby Terminal Island, because Phil Kaufman lived down the street from Phil Hartman. It's really easy for me to get confused. Phil Kaufman was the road manager for the Rolling Stones. He also was the rock and roll manager for the Flying Burrito Brothers. He was also the property manager for the Manson family for television. The fake Manson family, the one that they want you to think goes around stabbing people with kitchen cutlery. That Manson family. Well, guess what? They only lived 4 miles away from Phil Hartman. They lived at 13158 Chandler Boulevard, really in Van Nuys. They call it Sherman Oaks. It's Van Nuys. And that's close to the CBS studios, where I'm sure they were all casted from CBS. Anyway, they're all living there, and they're managed by Phil Kaufman, not to be confused with Phil Hartman. Now, Phil Hartman was, obviously he was about Susan Atkins' age. He's about Susan Atkins' age. So I'm not sure exactly where he was. I have a feeling he might have been going to, in that area, Cal State Northridge, because after Phil Hartman left Santa Monica Junior College, he went up to Chatworth, to Northridge, where the St. John's Military Academy is, where Gregory Peck went to school. Anyway, right there, right close to the Spahn Ranch, the George Spahn Ranch, where the fake Manson family allegedly lived, but they didn't live there, but they tell you they did. Anyway, close to that proximity of the Santa Susana Pass is Cal State Northridge, and Phil Hartman went there and studied art design, and that is where he pursued creating album covers for rock and roll bands that had record contracts, probably with Warner Brothers or Columbia Records or one of the alphabet soup, intermediaries, like Reprise or Decca or whatever. Everything rolls up to CBS or NBC or RCA, Columbia. There's only a few places that are going to provide the money to sponsor or delete a musical artist. Anyway, so Phil Hartman apparently had some contacts because he got 40 album covers approved. That's pretty impressive for a young guy in his 20s, early 20s. What I'm trying to tell you is that he is hanging out in the neighborhood where the Manson family mendacities were created. He's hanging out in the area where years later, 1977, Gary Francis Powers is murdered, having his helicopter exploded in the air within a mile of where Phil Hartman ends up living on Encino Avenue, where the St. John's military, Christian military. I always love that when Christianity and killing people goes together. Christian Military Academy. Anyway, so we don't have all the particulars, but they had a rocky relationship. 2 children, Bern and Phil Hartman. And so we come to the evening of May 28th, 1998, and Phil Hartman goes to bed, and Bern, who I don't believe was living on the property, they were separated, but she came over, and Phil was asleep in the bedroom. She went in there, shot him 3 times with a .38 caliber pistol, allegedly. Again, who knows? There's no witnesses. And then somebody calls the police. It's a pretty big house. They've got a steel gate on the perimeter of their property. It's on a corner. It's a corner lot, but it's sort of like a fortress. So I'm not really clear on who called the police, but the police arrived. They removed the 2 children, the young children, from the property, and then they get the gun that was used to kill Phil Hartman. So the police wrongfully leave Bern alone. So whenever I hear things like the police leaving a murder suspect alone, like they did with Leonard Lake, and he drank, the 2 cyanide pills and went bye-bye. Why would they do that? He murdered 25 people. Why would you leave him alone? But they did. So whenever you leave someone alone, guess what? Guess what happens? So she goes back into the bedroom where her dead husband is, and then she blows her brains out through her eye socket one time with a second pistol. Don't know the caliber, but she had a second gun. So the police got the first gun, but they didn't get the second gun. Some really good police work there. All right. I have a lot of questions about this Phil Hartman double murder situation that don't add up in my mind. I mean, maybe it was a murder-suicide like People Magazine online tells me it is. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's some other type of planned, premeditated murder. And maybe there were other people on the property that we don't know about. I don't know. I've learned to never believe the poppycock stories because they really got that Sharon Tate story. You couldn't get it more incorrect. I mean, they got it completely wrong, right? I mean, if it's a military attack and involves military weapons, you should mention that, unless you're trying to conceal that fact. So in this case, I think there could be a lot of concealment going on in the Phil Hartman situation. Now, is it the same level of mendacity as the Sharon Tate? No, it's not. It's 2 people that are under age 40 that were killed under rather bizarre circumstances in Encino. It's funny, I took some tax planning courses from a really arrogant lawyer who lived in Encino, probably close to this guy. I never liked that guy. I never liked that guy. And I've only been to Encino personally in my life once. One time in my whole life. And I rode my bicycle through it on my way to Topanga Canyon. Yeah, and past Old Topanga Canyon, near Gary Hinman's old house, and down to Malibu, and over to the Malibu Colony, and Pepperdine, and north to Mulholland Highway. Not to be confused with Mulholland Road, or Mulholland Boulevard. Mulholland Boulevard, named after William Mulholland, the uneducated man that brought water to Los Angeles. William Mulholland did not graduate from any university. William Mulholland, the head of the first water company, where they created the movie Chinatown around William Mulholland, directed by Roman Polanski, produced by Paramount Pictures, Gulf and Western. Henry Kissinger on the board of directors. That's right. I don't think Bob Evans had much to do with that film at all. I mean, he likes to tell you that he did The Godfather. I don't think so, no. Anyway, let's move on to William Shatner, who's one of my all-time favorites. He comes from Quebec, Canada, Montreal. And he met with immediate success upon coming to America. He got on those Twilight episodes immediately with Rod Serling. And Rod Serling died at age 50, very young. And he was the producer, writer, director of most of the Twilight Zone episodes, which all had juxtaposition endings, which I loved as a child. Anyway, William Shatner appeared in at least one, and I think a couple of those. He also appeared, I believe, in 2 or 3 Columbos, my favorite detective show, because of how absurd and preposterous the show was. I loved it because it was so much like Perry Mason. It was like completely opposite of the way it is in real life. Like a lawyer that you can trust. Not in real life you can't. A detective that's actually going to focus on a criminal homicide until it's concluded. I don't think so. Always get the bad guy. I don't think so. But anyway, it was fun to watch on television. So William Shatner's been married and divorced. He's been married 4 times. He's been divorced 3 times. And his wife, his 40-year-old wife, Noreen, 28 years his junior, she drowned in the swimming pool in his Studio City home, if you believe it. She's a strong swimmer. And she's 40 years old. And her blood alcohol level is 3 times normal. So that's what I like to do. Drink, a couple of bottles of vodka and go swimming alone, by myself. And then the body is at the bottom of the deep end of the pool. So that's kind of similar to the Victor Ota family, where 4 out of 5 people were found in the deep end of the pool at the bottom. Now, they were all shot with .38 caliber pistols, like Phil Hartman was. But Noreen Shatner was just drowned. Now, that's August 9th, 1999. William Shatner didn't really know Noreen very well. He met her on a movie set of Kung Fu, a sequel to Kung Fu, which I think William Shatner was directing. Anyway, she's 28 years younger than him. He only knew her about 4 years, so he would have been 64, and she would have been 36 years old. Now, so they didn't have a particularly good wedding. Apparently, they got married in Pasadena in a private home. Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock, was the best man. William Shatner is quoted as saying that just before the wedding, Leonard Nimoy called him on the phone and asked, "Do you know that Noreen is an alcoholic, Bill?" And William said, "Yes, I know, but I love her. I'm going to marry her anyway." And then allegedly, Leonard Nimoy remarked, "Well, you're going to have a rough road," or words to that effect. But that road was a very short road. It didn't last very long because they were only married for 2 years. So I just don't think it was a long road. Anyway, so I think they met when she was 36 and they got married when she was 38, and then she ends up drowning in the swimming pool at age 40. Now, just like the Columbo episodes that William Shatner was the murderer in and always had an alibi, he followed that script. In this case, he's having dinner with his daughter in Orange County, which is about an hour and 20 minutes away, south, maybe an hour. Depends on traffic. It's hard to judge the distance. If there was no traffic, which is not the case, probably on August 9th, 1999, but if there was no traffic, that William Shatner would only be 60 minutes away. But if it was a heavy traffic, it could be double that. So he could be 2 hours away. I know because I've done the drive. I've done the drive from Burbank, which is essentially where Studio City is. I've done that drive from Burbank, from the Lockheed Skunk Works, and I've driven to Irvine. Now, I don't know where in Orange County William Shatner said he was, and I'm going to assume he was with he has 3 children, and I don't know the names of his 3 children, but he does have a daughter who was born in Los Angeles, who's by the name of Melanie, and she was 34 years old at the time that the 40-year-old child bride drowns in the swimming pool. So what I'm trying to tell you is Melanie is not that different in age than the wife of William Shatner, and he's having dinner with Melanie. He's got a restaurant receipt to back it up, but I don't think they were in Anaheim, and I don't think they were in Santa Clara. I'm going to say they were probably in Irvine or Newport Beach or Laguna Beach or Costa Mesa or Lake Forest or one of the nicer parts of Orange County, which are the southern parts. See, that's going to add 20 minutes to 30 minutes to the drive, depending on how far off Highway Interstate 5, or because I'm assuming he used Highway 5. I don't think he used the San Diego freeway. I think 5 would have been faster drive for William Shatner heading to, if he's heading to Studio City. Anyway, he arrives home at 10:15 to discover his beautiful wife that he's filed divorces with her on October 21st, 1998. William Shatner filed for divorce, and they'd only been married about a year. And he's already filing for divorce. He specifically petitioned the judge for no alimony payments to Noreen. So it's William Shatner who takes the initiative to file divorce against the 39-year-old Noreen with the petitional stipulation of no alimony. That was October 21st, 1998. Okay, and then less than a year later on August 9th, right? 10 months later, Noreen is drunk or has a high blood alcohol level, and she's drowned at the deep end of the pool in William Shatner's Studio City house. And he discovers her, and then he immediately gives a press conference where he says, "My beautiful wife is dead. I won't have her beautiful laughter and memories anymore." Well, you just filed for divorce 10 months ago. You can't be that excited about her. Anyway, so I never really bought into William Shatner's an actor, and he's a really good actor. And he really doesn't want to be married to Noreen. And I don't know why she's in his home. I thought he would have booted her out. Anyway, she comes from a pretty good family in Boston, but in any case, working class family. And anyway, she's dead. And what I find particularly disturbing, just as I find many of these black ops, is when the police make statements. And the Los Angeles police, in this case, made a statement immediately. Like the morning of the next day, they say that it was an accidental drowning. Now, this is before the Los Angeles County medical examiner has looked at the body. The medical examination autopsy has not happened yet, and there has been no report. And there's been no report available or issued. So I don't understand why the Los Angeles Police Department is concluding that it's an accidental drowning before we know that it's an accidental drowning. And she's a strong swimmer. And she's 40 years old. I know a lot of people that own homes with swimming pools that are not good swimmers. None of them ever drown. Nobody drowns. It's really unusual. You might hear of like an infant child that might drown. or the kitty cat gets in the pool and drowns. Just telling you, this is what happened. Then William Shatner goes into seclusion for, allegedly 2 years. Then he reemerges, and I believe he through his horse equestrian activities, meets a young woman, again, substantially younger than him, and they get married, and they were one of those reality TV shows where they remodeled their home together. Then they got divorced. So 4 marriages, 3 divorces, and 1 mysterious death in the Studio City swimming pool for William Shatner from Canada. Phil Hartman, 3 marriages, 2 divorces, 1 murder-suicide, 2 children. William Shatner, 3 children. Both from Canada. Both living in a military-industrial grid known as Hollywood, CIA Spooksville, Encino, Van Nuys, Canoga Park, home to porn. So porn was a clandestine services operation, right? Under pacification and control. Porn. The porn industry has moved apparently to Van Nuys and Las Vegas and maybe to Florida. So it's a little fragmented now today. But for decades it was in Canoga Park where they put Charlie Manson, gave him a home there. He wasn't involved with porn, but he lived in a porn zip code, which is where the Grossman burn unit is. It's in a pornography zip code. Yeah, it is. It's Canoga Park. The media calls it West Hills. It's always been Canoga Park for decades. It was Canoga Park, but it's been renamed. I guess if you're west of Highway 27, they call it West Hills, and if you're east, where Charlie Manson was just right off the freeway to the east, they call that Canoga Park. So it's West Hills as soon as you get over Highway 27, which is Topanga Canyon. If you don't know, it's Topanga Canyon Highway. Goes from the Ronald Reagan Freeway, past the Spawn Ranch, Santa Susana, goes down past the Grossman Burn Unit, aka Cosmetic Surgery Center, goes past the Phil Hartman house to Canoga Canyon, past Old Topanga Canyon, to down where Sharon Tate was Malibu Beach Barbie and Don't Make Waves, and scored her copper tan sunscreen ad when she's working with Tony Curtis, which is just east of the Malibu Colony, which is a gated Spooksville community below Pepperdine University and Hughes Research Lab and TRW's research labs. All right. So what do we learn from this story? Well, again, I don't know what happened. I mean, we got Phil Hartman is dead. His wife that they were going through divorce proceedings, she's dead. William Shatner's much younger wife, age 40, Noreen, she's dead. So you got 3 dead people. You got William Shatner going on to get married and divorced a 4th time. It's in the same zip code that Gary Powers was murdered. It's the zip code where Charlie Manson was framed. It was, or sheep-dipped. It was where the Manson family girls were sheep-dipped and created, within 4 miles of Phil Hartman's house, within 5 miles of William Shatner's house, within 3 miles of the CBS studios, television studios. Home to Art Linkletter, home to Bob Hope and Toluca Lake, NBC studios, close to NBC, CBS. They're both in the same general area. Anyway, I find all these things very suspicious, and it looks to me like Phil Hartman went to high school in a CI military industrial place, which is called La Playa, which is the beach. It's right next door to Marina del Rey, where Dennis Wilson was murder-suicided, whatever. That's right where Johnny Carson, breathed his last breath in Marina del Rey on his 4th marriage, which is just, a mile from the Venice High School and another half mile to the Anne Hayes fiery car crash that never happened, the hoax. And that's a mile and a half from Santa Monica Junior College, where Phil Hartman attended and probably was selected for Hollywood services. after they sent him up to Northridge and to Chatworth and to Northridge, Encino Way. And then he's plugged in with Neil Young and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and the music industry, and then the dating game, and then the Saturday Night Live, and a member of the NBC Peacock family, and then murder-suicided at age 49. So, and William Shatner's wife mysteriously drowns at age 40. So, I don't know. I don't think it looks good. And the more I look into these cases, the more I understand how common it is. You know, every time it happens, it's like, oh, he's the last person in the world. There's all these actors that you interview, and they say, oh, I never would have thought this would have happened. Poppycock, they're all controlled people. Whether your name is Art Linkletter and you have 2 children murdered and your son-in-law, that's 3. You have your daughter. If your 20-year-old daughter gets thrown out of a 6th-floor apartment while she's baking cookies with a 48-year-old CIA operative in her apartment, that's not a suicide. That's not a suicide. And then yet, that's the official story. Suicide by LSD. And there's no proof she was on LSD. There's no proof that Anne Heche was on ecstasy on her breakup bender Lost Weekend, which maybe lasted 5.5 hours and was a paid gig. You see, nothing you read in the newspapers is truthful. It's all a mendacity. So I'm going to throw, William Shatner onto the fire of the cremation oven of suspicion, because it really looks like a contract killing. Because his wife's death is very similar to Jersey's Kaczynski's suicide. He's a partner with Roman Polanski and Wojtek Frykowski and Abigail Folger, and his alcohol level was 3 times normal, and he had a plastic bag over his head with a cord around himself, and they called that a suicide. I'm calling that a murder. When you're drunk and you got a plastic bag over your head, I'm calling it a murder. Robin Williams, same thing. He's going to neuroscience treatments at the Sandler Neuroscience Center in Mission Bay, San Francisco, and then he is garroted at home in Tiburon. That could have been a murder. Easily a murder. Jerzy Kaczynski looks like a murder. The William Shatner, his alibi is a little shaky. I mean, it would be better if it wasn't his daughter. Why does it have to be his daughter who's his alibi? Why can't it be some person not in his family, not depending on his trust fund? Why can't it be some independent person? I'd like to interview the waiter. But I'm not suggesting that William Shatner would be involved with the drowning. He could be. He could be. Then he goes to dinner to create the false alibi, and then he comes, oh my God, my wife is dead at the bottom of the pool. I don't know when she died, and they don't know what time she died. He finds her at 10:15. That's when he calls police. I don't know when he finished dinner in Orange County. I don't know what city he was in Orange County. But I can tell you that they also could have had a contractor come, a plumber, someone that paints your homes, could have killed Noreen Shatner. Doesn't have to be William Shatner. What I'm saying is that death is very suspicious, and it looks like a murder to me. I don't know who did it, but it looks like a murder. It looks like a Jerzy Kaczynski situation. That was a murder, but they didn't call it a murder. They call it suicide. And whenever they call it a suicide, and you're working in the clandestine services, suicides are typically homicides. All right, thanks for listening. Have a great day. I'm getting new equipment, so I'm getting a camera, better sound equipment, and better lighting. So my videos should be dramatically improved, and I'll probably go back and redo many of them that don't have good quality. Thank you. Good quality sound or visual. Have a great day. Bye-bye.